You, thank you, Cyrus. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us this evening in Mumbai. Your tenure has seen extraordinary challenges, whether it is COVID, the war in between Russia and Ukraine, or the conflict in the Middle East. And yet, today we are with an 8% growth, envy of most of the world, and being credited with getting so much right. When you look, one, how do you look back at your own tenure, and what do you think are the things that we got right the most?
Thank you, ET. Now it's become an annual event, and I tried avoiding it this time because of other compulsions, but the ET team has been, as always, very persuasive. And sorry, I've reached here late, but the usual standard excuses. Well, look back, should I only to learn from all the challenges that we faced, or look forward because the prospects are so bright? And thanks to all Indians for the fantastic, what should I say, fantastic resilience that we've shown between 20 and today, that we stand out if you look at all the global economies of some size. And therefore, I would think lessons have been learned, some precedents have been set. We are looking forward to a bright Amritka.
Wonderful. You've just completed, this is your fifth year as the finance minister. We are at the cusp of elections. Your government is going to seek a renewed mandate. Would you say the economic performance of your government is going to be one of the key planks as you seek a renewed mandate? The opposition has been raising price rise and unemployment, or rather, unemployment as two key issues. They've been trying to make that as a plank. What is going to be your approach when you go to the people for renewed mandate this time?
See, the opposition is well within its rights to speak about issues of concern which affect common people. In India, inflation is a repeat monsoon, crop, and a few uncertainties based repeat challenge, which I think every government knows when it will hit them badly and what are the measures that they should take to keep it well within an acceptable level. It's only when there are extreme events that sometimes it goes beyond. But when it goes beyond, you should also be sure enough that you have enough tools to bring it back to where it should be. And that's where the contrast lies. In spite of COVID, in spite of global value chain disruptions, in spite of droughts in some area and floods in some others, I think this government has been very focused in keeping inflation well within the tolerance band. Probably 2 times it would have just gone above it, but soon enough it was brought down. As opposed to 22 months of double-digit inflation during UPA. And sure enough, this government or that government knew also the ways in which you can make sure by dealing with the supply side issues, you would have been able to control at least the food inflation, which is what those 10 years between 2004 and 14 did not see. And therefore, as regards inflation, if it's an issue which the opposition would like to raise, I think there's enough data-based substantial answers to give. However, inflation is always, as they say proverbially, it's a tax which is not levied, but the burden is there. So we should be conscious of it, and we should obviously do every time everything, even if it's a repeat thing, we'll have to address it. But as regards jobs, and I'm sitting in Mumbai, I can see quite a few leaders of industry. Other than the questions which people would raise on India's data collection, you don't have enough information on formal employment, women's participation in workforce, or number of informal and so on, I think India is also seeing a major reset in the labor market, and that is very sharply seen now. On the one hand, you see people who are skilled, semi skilled, who are also making efforts to upskill themselves and move on to new opportunities, better opportunities. Equally, you're seeing the informal sector getting formalized. And when informal sector gets formalized and at this scale, you're not counting them yet. So you do have a data paucity. And without adequate data on this, many of us are going with anecdotal examples of people not finding jobs. If only we take government schemes aimed at giving credit without collateral for people who want to do their own business, self employed people who today are expanding their businesses. And how do I know that? Not anecdotally, but based on data. Banks where they took the first stage loan, let us say at 10,000, have moved over to having the second or the third stage loans. And it is on better performance in their business that the banks also come in with collateral free, additional, and increasing amounts. All these cannot be just one person doing it all for himself. They are creating jobs. We've not got a proper mechanism to count them. And as a result, it's fine for all of us to talk about labor, employment, participation of women, and so on. But as long as our collection of data is pertaining only to the small formal sector, and we miss out for various reasons the transition that's happening between informal to formal, we are not going to talk with data in hand. It's all right, we can have a conversation.
Ma'am, I want to come back to your budget speech. When you delivered the interim budget this year, you spoke about, I mean, you kept it short and sweet, and then you raised a lot of expectations when you spoke about next generation reforms. Could you give us a little bit of a sense about what is in store? Um,
I'm purposely using the next generation as an expression rather than second generation, third generation. India missed out on continuing with good reforms since after 91. Although the package which was given to us by IMF and World Bank, and much has been said about economic reforms, opening up of the Indian economy, from then, opening up partially, yes, then, and even now, we are sort of almost close to full, but not really full. Even now, we are partial. But between these two stages, several stages of reforms which had to happen, even at the first instance, did not take off. Maybe one or two of the conditions were fulfilled, and after that, everybody forgot about reforms. And between 2004 and 14, also, major reforms which had to be undertaken as the bedrock of things on which you can build the other reforms hadn't happened. So, not because I'm a part of this government, but you can just sit and back of the envelope calculate or count the number of steps that we have taken, which are systemic reforms based. Finance Ministry, and therefore I will only speak about, let's say, the GST, IBCs of the world, the MCA portals, the faceless taxation, appeals going faceless, the GST system also becoming faceless, and the kind of customs reforms that we made in the airports and seaports, the turnaround of ships which come to India rapidly moving out, and the efficiencies for importers and so on. So there are ever so many things that one can count, but that is true of several other ministries as well. So when I say next generation reforms, I actually mean in every sector, the next stage of reforms will have to be undertaken. But what's more important is reforms cannot stop just at the central government's doorstep. We've worked with the states in carrying forward several of the reforms. In fact, one of the things on which some of the states were not so very happy, but I'm happy to say it here, is up to the FRBM limit. We are in ET environment, so I'm sure you're going to be happy hearing it. Up to the fiscal responsibility, budgetary management law, which is with the center and with the states, up to 3% of your GSDP, you are allowed to borrow. That's for the states. But from the COVID era, we've moved every year by allowing additional borrowing over and above the 3%. But for every 0.25, 0.25, 4.25s leading to the next 1%, and again 4.25s leading to the next 1%, adding up to a total of 5% borrowing. We went with reforms to be done and undertaken for each one of the 0.25%. Initially, there was the resistance from states saying, how could you do it? We said, we are not restricting you within the 3%, which is your right. Please go ahead. But if you want to borrow more, please let's all understand that we need to improve our systems. Many states, in fact, most states agreed to it in the first year. Now almost all of them do it. And as a result, you see at the state level, those reforms which we had taken for granted at the center happening even at the states. So the next generation reform will have to ensure, we'll have to ensure that the third layer, the panchayat and the urban local bodies also join hands. After all, when you go in to set up businesses at the panchayat level or at the urban local body level, it is that third tier which comes into operation. They are the policy makers. And if they are not geared to opening up the systems, you're not going to have any difference felt. So in every sector, reforms that will have to be undertaken keeping in mind it has to percolate down to the lowest elected body that governs us.
Ma'am, your approach to stimulus has been to spend, focus a lot on infrastructure. I mean, you intervened with supply side measures broadly. At the time, you said that this will crowd in private sector capex. Has the private sector, and as you said, many captains of industry are here, and many of them indeed have made lots of investments. But broadly, has India Inc. sufficiently invested in this time? Have they met your expectations broadly?
You're sure you want to ask me this question in this audience?
Why not, ma'am?
Man, that's a question for them. In fact, that question should be asked of them with me sitting here.
But the question is,
I think they are coming forward. I think they're coming forward. And like the way I said, when we are talking about employment, the scarcity of data, the transition, the reset that is happening in the economy, and such factors which we'll have to keep in mind when we assess employment as a whole for the economy, even as regards investments, private investment coming in, there is a lot of activity in some sunrise sectors. Semiconductors, solar, renewable energy, various other aspects of it, hydrogen, ammonia, green ammonia, storage capacities, rare earths, materials. Investment is happening. And we all know about it. We see huge columns written about it, welcoming such measures. But when we look for data, just as for labor, we look only at the formal sector and wouldn't care about informal. We don't look at the new and emerging sectors for investment where huge changes are happening. But we tend to look at integrated steel plants of the world, cement factories of the world. This capacity increase, they are sitting with excess capacity. They'll have to improve on it in utilizing it. They're sitting with logistics burden. We'll have to improve on that. But they're happy about changing over to a totally new sunrise sector. We need to see that as well.
And the electoral bonds data was published yesterday, and there is a lot of criticism that how come several top donors are also people who are facing action from agencies and so on. Is there some thought about, I mean, one, how do you respond to that criticism? Two, is there a different way that the government is thinking about increasing transparency in the political funding process?
Linking it with ED, I think, is absolutely sitting and having a cup of tea in the lounge and having a little merry chat. Do you know for each one of the ED in this context as to when the payment was made? Was it before or was it after? Maybe it was before. And even after that, the ED chose to go and visit them. So let's not very quickly assume that every ED visit happened to those who later came around and said, I want to give donation, please save me. I think there's lots more homework to be done by journalists, and you have solid 2 months, even as you're covering the elections, to study it and then come to conclusion. I don't want industry to be badnamed like this. I don't think they come and give donations only because they want to escape the ED. It doesn't happen that way. ED existed before Modi, and ED exists even long in India till 2047, I'm sure, with all the Viksit Bharat. There is no direct correlation to ED and the donation business. And again, you don't certainly know where the donation went. They bought the bonds. But did they give it only to that government which is controlling the ED, or did they give it to the local governments which are run by other state parties? Are you sure before asking that question? So let's be clear, we are not going to speculate on the bonds. Data is now available. You were cribbing about not having the data. Please go do your homework, get it all out. We'll talk about it with a lot more facts before us.
Wonderful. I have so many more questions, but unfortunately, we are now out of time. Thank you so much once again, ma'am, for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.
Thank you.